Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and this is my card for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge, which as soon as I looked at it I was like, I'm gonna make another Halloween card. The colors were navy, orange, beige, and white. And I was like, I can make this work. I can pull the navy in. So I had this Clearly Besotted stamp set sitting here from my last little haul. This is their best Halloween stamp set that's absolutely adorable. So I had this scrap of Canson XL watercolor paper and I'm stamping the images onto it with VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And I stamped all of the images, all of these little balloon characters. I stamped the ghost twice because I decided I'm going to use one of them on the inside of the card. And then the candy corn balloons, because they were smaller, I was like, oh, I'll just stamp multiples of those because I'm sure I can, make use of them. And then I set those aside for a minute because I wanted to do my background. So I've got a larger piece of that same watercolor paper already taped down onto a masonite board. And then I just used a flat brush and got the watercolor paper wet with clean water. And then I'm just picking up color from my Mission Gold watercolor set. And I kind of mixed 2 or 3 different shades of blue. I wanted to create like a really deep navy background for this because 1, that's part of the color challenge, and 2, as soon as I looked at it, that's what kind of inspired me. I was like, what would I do with the navy? And I was like, ooh, I could make it look like a night sky is kind of what I was going for. So I did multiple layers of this and heat set it with my heat tool just to speed things up so I didn't have to wait as long. And like I said, I wanted it to be really, really deep, really dark. So I was kind of experimenting here and playing around. And I also pulled out my distress sprayer and was spraying that too. I kind of liked how it was creating that sort of splatter effect. And then finally, after about, I think it was about the 3rd layer of watercolor, I just set it aside to let it air dry while I worked on all of the stamped images. So same thing, I would just get each area wet with clean water and then I'd go in with the different colors. So for the candy corn, I used a couple different shades of orange and then a couple different shades of yellow. And finally, I got the bottom areas wet with the clean water and then just barely touched my brush to the black watercolor to give just a tiny bit of shading. And I did that same thing with the ghosts as well. I got them wet with the clean water, barely pulled in a little bit of black just to give it a little bit of shading. And then I added a tiny bit of brown to create more of a beige color. That's where I pulled the beige in for the color challenge. I was like, oh, the ghosts they can kind of be a little bit dirty and that'll just work. And then for the little spider balloon, I just used black for him and was kind of careful to make sure not to color over he's got little teeth, almost like little vampire fangs, and then little the white area of his eyes. And then of course for the pumpkin, I did the same shades of orange and then just quickly did the pumpkin face with some black and set those aside to dry as well. And then I went back to my background that's all dry now and decided to spray it with the distress sprayer again. And then while it was still wet, pick up some of the color with a piece of paper towel. And I don't know, you might be able to see it in the detail shots at the end. It actually kind of picked up some of the texture from the paper towel, I think because I layered so much color, but I was okay with that. It just kind of worked. I was looking for a little bit splattery and sort of a grungy look. And then once that was dry, I quickly just peeled off the painter's tape and then set this in my little splatter cubby here. And then pulled out my go-to, which is my Copic Opaque White, which I just put on a acrylic block. And then with a wet paintbrush, I just flicked that across the edges of the acrylic block to create this fun splatter. And I made sure to use up every little bit of that Copic White. I wanted a lot of splatter on this. So once I was happy with all that splatter, I set this aside to dry again. And I die cut all of the little images there with the coordinating die set. And then here's where I didn't include this on camera, but I fiddled a lot with where I was going to place this die. This is the 2nd largest die from Simon Says Basic Rectangle Die Set. And normally the OCD in me would not want that watercolor part to be centered within that die cut. And it was hard. It was really hard not to do that. But I was like, no, it needs to be off to the side. I want a clear area for my sentiment. You can do this. So I did, ran it through my machine and die cut it so that the watercolor area was more off to the upper left of this piece so that I had a blank area along the bottom there to stamp my sentiment, which is from that same little stamp set. And I used my mini Misty for this because I wanted to make sure it was stamped perfectly since I was stamping it right onto the background. And I got that stamped with the same VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And then once I'm done with that, I started figuring out how I'm going to adhere all these little characters. So what I did is I just flipped each one over and applied a very thin line of Branger's multi-medium matte adhesive. Then I'm using some heavyweight white thread here and set that in the middle of each image. And then I also taped it down with some Scotch tape just to keep everything in place. The multimedia matte was more just to keep the threads centered within each image so that when I adhere everything and then pull the threads together, the threads aren't going to go all wonky and look weird. I did the extra step, again, a little OCD just to keep things looking a little more perfect. And then I lay out all of my little images, how I want this little cluster of balloons to look. And once I was happy with it, I'm going to start adhering everything down. Almost all of these I adhered with some foam tape, other than the little pumpkin balloon. That one I adhered flat because I wanted the other ones above it. So once I get all of these adhered, being aware of where all these strings were, so they're not like pulled in funny directions or anything, I'm going to get them all adhered. And then I kind of thought for a second what I was going to do with all these strings. I could just leave them hanging, tie a bow, whatever. And it just happened to work that they all just kind of went together so nicely. So I just pulled it around the back and then taped that string into place to hold everything down. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to apply a generous amount of foam tape to the back of this piece and adhere it to my card base, which is heavyweight white cardstock, cut to 4 1/4 by 11, and I had scored it at 5 1/2, so it's a top folding A2 sized card. And then on the inside of the card, I'm going to use these remaining little watercolor balloons, and I'm just stamping the balloon string from the set with some My Favorite Things Grow Gray ink. I just thought the pale gray would look a little bit better rather than black, plus it ties with, you know, the white strings I used on the front. And then I'm going to stamp another sentiment from the set with the black ink. And then, of course, to completely finish this off, I had to add some sequins. So I pulled out my Pre-Pink Posh Sparkling Clear Mix as well as the 4mm Tangerine and just kind of sprinkled those fairly generously on the background of this card. And once I was kind of happy with where I had everything placed, I'm going to adhere them into place with that same multi-medium matte adhesive, and that finishes off my card. So I will have links below the video to my blog post with links to all the supplies used. There will also be a link to the color challenge if you want to check it out and see what everyone else made as well. So check out the info box below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.